Hi everyone, and you are welcome to this lecture, Comprehensions in Python. In this lecture, we are going to understand what comprehensions are, then we are going to see list comprehension, set comprehension, dictionary comprehension, and as usual, I'm going to end up this lecture by a quick summary, so let's get started. First of all, let's start by understanding what comprehensions are. Comprehensions are a concise way to create a new collection, which could be a list, a dictionary, or a set from other iterables. How we are able to create these collections? Simply, in comprehensions, the new collection is created by applying an expression on each item in an iterable. So, to create a collection using comprehension, you need two things. You need an iterable and you need an expression. One of the most common questions that I have been asked is why I need comprehensions. The answer is very simple. Comprehensions, as you will see later on, will make your code highly readable, and this is the first reason. The second reason, when you want to learn any programming language, you will start to face some problems. So you will look for a solution for these problems, and if you want to find these solutions, you have to check community websites like Stack Overflow or others. You will note that comprehensions are very used in the community, so being able to understand how to use comprehensions will make your way easy to find solutions for your problems. Now let's see comprehensions syntax. So if you want to create a new collection using comprehensions, you have three syntax to do that. The first one is the following. As you see here, I have expression, then for loop, element, and iterable, which means I want to apply this expression on each item of this iterable. The second way, you can say expression for each element in iterable if condition. And by using this way, we are able to apply a filter here, help me to exclude some items from the iterable if I want. The last way, you can say expression, then you can use if else condition, then for element in iterable. You have to be careful. When I use if else statement within comprehension, you have to use if before for. But if you want to use for with if only, without else, for should become before if. Now let's move to PyCharm IDE to see some examples about all of these syntax so we can understand how we apply them properly. First of all, let's talk about list comprehension. I will assume that I have the following list, its name numbers, and I have the numbers from 1 to 6. Let's see an example about the first type of syntax, which is expression for element in iterable. In this example, I will assume that I want to calculate n to the power of 2 for each element n in the list numbers. If I want to use the traditional way, I will use the following code. So I will define a list, which is an empty list. Then I will say for each n inside numbers, I will say list.append n to the power of 2. And then I will print list. If I run, as you see here, I got 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and 36. Now let's see how we can do the same thing exactly using list comprehension. So I will give this list a name, list1 now, and I will say list2 equal to. First thing, I will put the expression, and in my case, this is the expression, which is n to the power of 2. For each n in numbers, and then I will print list2. Run. As you see here, list1 and list2 have exactly the same elements. So if you define a list in this way or in this way, in both cases, you will get the same result. So, for the first type of syntax, we read the expression in this way. I will say, I want n to the power of 2 for each n in the list numbers. Now let's see an example about the second type of syntax. I will replace this by the following. So now I'm talking about second type of syntax in which I'm using if statement, and I want to do the following. I want n to the power of 2 for each n in the list numbers, but now I want this condition. I want to use only the element bigger than 2. So, in the traditional way, the first one, if I want to update this example, I will say if n is bigger than 2. Then I will put colon. In comprehensions way, I will say n to the power of 2 for n in numbers if n is bigger than 2. If I run now, you will see again that I got exactly the same result. So, this type of syntax is read in the following way. I want n to the power of 2 for each n in numbers if n is bigger than 2. Now let's see an example about the last type of syntax. I will replace this by the following, and in this example, we are going to use the following syntax: expression, if condition, else expression for element in iterable. I am going to do the following. I will say, I want an iterable which has n to the power of 2 if n is bigger than 2. Else, I want n divided by 2 for each n in the list numbers. So, I want to calculate power of 2 for the element bigger than 2, or I want to calculate n divided by 2 for the element less than 2. If I want to update my example in the traditional way, I will do the following. I will say here else, and I will append to my list n divided by 2. And this is traditional way. Now let's see comprehensions way. I will say I want n to the power of 2 if n is smaller than 2. Else I want n divided by 2 for each n inside the list numbers. Let me run now. Sorry, I have a small mistake here. If n is bigger than 2, let me run. And as you see here, I got exactly the same result. So for the third type of syntax, I'm reading the expression in this way. I say I want n to the power of 2 if n is bigger than 2, else I want n divided by 2, and I want to take the elements from the list numbers. Until now, we have seen 3 examples about comprehensions in case of list. But in this lecture, I mentioned that we are going to learn about list, set, and dictionary comprehensions. Actually, the syntax is exactly the same for set and dictionary, but you have just to replace the bracket. So if you want to define list comprehension, you have to use square bracket, or if you want to define set comprehensions or dictionary comprehensions, you have to use curly braces. Now let's see some examples about set and dictionary to understand what I mean by this. Let's talk about set first. Assume I have the following list, which has the following item, many ones, many twos, and so on. And let me say that I want to create the set of elements, which are bigger than 2. In this case, I will say set equal to, and I will use now curly braces because it's a set. And I say n for each n in list if n is bigger than 2. And then I will print the set. Run. As you see here, I got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you will note that I have only unique items because we know in set that one item cannot be repeated more than one time. Also, we can note that I use exactly the same syntax for the case of set, but I just replaced square bracket by curly braces. Now let's see one more example about dictionary comprehensions, and this would be the last example in this code session. I will assume that I have the following list of numbers, and then I want to create a dictionary in which the key is the actual item from the list numbers and the value is the square of this value. So let's see how I will do that. I will use now curly braces as I mentioned before because it's a dictionary now, and I will take the element exactly the same for n in numbers. Now here in the part of expression, because I want to define a dictionary, I have to define 2 things. I have to define the key and the value. How I want to define in this example, I mentioned that I want the key to be the element itself, so I will say it's n, and I want the value to be n to the power of 2, and that's it. Let me print now dct, and I will run. As you see here, I have a dictionary now. It has key, which is the actual element, and value, which is this value, which is n to the power of 2. So 1 to the power of 2, it's 1, 2 to the power of 2, it's 4, and so on. And that's all for this code session. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this lecture. First of all, comprehensions have been defined as a concise way to create a new collection from other iterables. And we see that in comprehensions, we apply an expression on each item of iterable. And we see that using comprehensions, we can create a list, a dictionary, or a set. For all of these collections, we use exactly the same syntax except the brackets. So for the case of list, we use square bracket, whereas for the case of dictionary and set, we use curly braces. And for the case of dictionary, we have to be careful that we have to define a key and a value. Now please refer to the file, Comprehensions in Python Challenges, in which you will find some challenges to practice what you have learned in this lecture. Thank you very much for your time, and if you are available, join me in the next lecture.